In the golden archives of Hollywood, some stories remain untold, hidden beneath layers of carefully crafted public personas and studio-manufactured narratives. For decades, fans of classic cinema have wondered about the real relationship between two of Disney's most beloved leading ladies. Now, at 79 years old, Hayley Mills has decided to break her silence about Maureen O'Hara, and what she reveals will forever change how we view one of Hollywood's most iconic friendships. This isn't just another celebrity tell-all. This is a story about mentorship, rivalry, redemption, and the price of perfection in an industry that demanded nothing less than flawlessness from its stars. When Hayley Mills first stepped onto a Hollywood soundstage in 1960, she was just 13 years old, a bright-eyed British girl with an infectious smile that would soon capture the hearts of millions. Her debut in Pollyanna wasn't just successful, it was phenomenal. The young actress earned a Special Academy Juvenile Award, becoming the last person to ever receive this honor. Disney had found its newest treasure, a wholesome, talented young woman who embodied everything the studio represented. But behind the fairy tale beginning, there was a complicated relationship developing with someone who should have been her greatest ally. Maureen O'Hara, the fiery red-headed Irish actress who had already conquered Hollywood with her beauty, talent, and formidable presence. Maureen O'Hara was everything Hollywood royalty should be. By the time Hayley entered the scene, Maureen had already worked with John Ford, starred opposite John Wayne multiple times, and established herself as one of the industry's most respected actresses. She was known for her fierce independence, her refusal to play by Hollywood's often demeaning rules for women, and her ability to hold her own in a male-dominated industry. When Disney cast both actresses in The Parent Trap in 1961, fans expected magic. What they got on screen was indeed magical. But what happened behind the scenes was far more complex than anyone could have imagined. For nearly 6 decades, Hayley Mills maintained a diplomatic silence about her experiences working with Maureen O'Hara. In interviews, she would offer pleasant, non-committal responses when asked about her famous co-star. Maureen was a professional, she would say, or working with her was an education. These carefully chosen words satisfied journalists but left fans sensing there was more to the story. Hollywood insiders whispered about tension on the set of The Parent Trap, about a young actress struggling to find her footing while working with a seasoned star who had very definite ideas about how things should be done. But the truth, as Hayley now reveals, was far more nuanced than simple set rivalry. The Parent Trap was a phenomenon that defined both actresses' careers in ways neither could have predicted. Hayley's dual role as Sharon and Susan showcased her remarkable talent, while Maureen played Maggie McKendrick, one of the twins' parents, with her characteristic warmth and strength. The film became a beloved classic, spawning remakes and securing its place in the pantheon of great family films. But during production, Hayley was navigating treacherous waters. She was a child in an adult's world, carrying the enormous responsibility of essentially playing 2 lead roles, while the studio's entire investment in the project rested on her young shoulders. And Maureen O'Hara, despite her professionalism, was dealing with her own complicated feelings about the changing landscape of Hollywood and her place in it. What Hayley reveals now, with the perspective that only decades can provide, is that Maureen O'Hara wasn't cold or difficult, she was terrified. At 41 years old, Maureen was watching Hollywood's obsession with youth reach new heights. Here was a 13-year-old girl commanding the screen with effortless charm, carrying a major production, and receiving the kind of attention and adoration that Maureen had worked decades to achieve. It wasn't jealousy in the petty sense, Hayley explains. It was something more profound and more human. Maureen saw in Hayley's arrival the beginning of her own obsolescence, a fear that haunts every actor but is particularly cruel to women in an industry that values youth above almost everything else. During the filming of The Parent Trap, there were moments of tension that the young Hayley couldn't fully understand at the time. Maureen would sometimes seem distant, occasionally offering critiques of Hayley's performance that felt unnecessarily harsh. There were days when the seasoned actress would retreat to her trailer between takes, avoiding the casual camaraderie that typically develops on a film set. The director, David Swift, had to carefully navigate the dynamics, ensuring that the production stayed on schedule while managing two actresses at very different points in their careers and lives. Hayley, in her youthful resilience, absorbed these experiences without fully grasping their deeper meaning. She knew something was off, but she lacked the life experience to understand the complex emotions driving Maureen's behavior. What Hayley didn't know then, but learned much later, was that Maureen O'Hara was fighting battles on multiple fronts. Her marriage to aviator Charles Blair was in its early stages, and while ultimately successful, it required her to balance her fierce independence with vulnerability and compromise, something that didn't come naturally to a woman who had fought so hard to maintain her autonomy in Hollywood. Professionally, she was being offered fewer leading roles, with studios increasingly positioning her as the mother figure rather than the romantic lead. The Parent Trap, while a wonderful film, was in some ways a symbol of this transition. She wasn't the star, a child was. She wasn't the romantic lead, she was the mother. For an actress who had swashbuckled alongside Errol Flynn and matched John Wayne scene for scene, this was a difficult pill to swallow. Years passed after The Parent Trap, and both actresses continued their careers along different trajectories. Hayley became Disney's most profitable star of the 1960s, appearing in beloved films like The Moon Spinners, That Darn Cat, and The Trouble with Angels. She was wholesome, talented, and seemingly perfect, the ideal Disney princess in an era when the studio was defining family entertainment. But Hayley was also trapped in a golden cage. The studio and public had clear expectations of who she should be, and deviating from that image carried significant professional risks. Meanwhile, Maureen continued working, though less frequently, choosing her projects carefully and maintaining her dignity even as Hollywood's interest in her waned. She never publicly complained, never played the victim, and maintained her reputation as a consummate professional. The two actresses didn't work together again after The Parent Trap, and their paths rarely crossed in the following decades. When they did encounter each other at industry events, their interactions were polite but distant. Hayley would later describe these meetings as cordial but not warm, a sadness evident in her voice when recalling them. She had hoped, as a young woman and later as an adult, that she and Maureen might develop a friendship, that the older actress might become a mentor figure. But Maureen kept her distance, and Hayley eventually stopped trying to bridge the gap, accepting that whatever had happened during The Parent Trap had created a permanent, if invisible, barrier between them. The turning point in Hayley's understanding came in the late 1990s, long after both actresses had stepped back from the Hollywood spotlight. Hayley was in her 50s by then, having experienced her own career ups and downs, including the difficult transition from child star to adult actress. She had faced her own demons, struggled with the burden of public expectations, and learned hard lessons about the entertainment industry's cruelty. She was at a charity event in London when she encountered someone who had worked closely with Maureen during the 1960s, a former publicist who had since retired and was willing to speak candidly about those years. This conversation, Hayley reveals, was illuminating in ways she never expected. The publicist explained that Maureen had often spoken about Hayley with a mixture of admiration and melancholy. Maureen had recognized the young actress's extraordinary talent and had actually been proud of her success, but she had also been grappling with her own sense of loss, watching the industry she loved evolve in ways that left her behind. The publicist shared that Maureen had once said, "Hayley Mills is everything Hollywood wants now. She's young, she's fresh, she's innocent. I was all those things once, but Hollywood has a short memory and an insatiable appetite for the new." These words, spoken decades earlier, finally helped Hayley understand the complexity of emotions that had driven Maureen's behavior during The Parent Trap. Armed with this new understanding, Hayley attempted to reach out to Maureen in the early 2000s. She wrote a letter, a heartfelt message expressing her respect for Maureen's career, acknowledging the challenges of being a woman in Hollywood, and extending an olive branch for friendship. She sent it to Maureen's home in Idaho, where the actress had retired with her husband. Weeks passed with no response, and Hayley assumed the letter had either not reached Maureen or had been ignored. She was disappointed but not entirely surprised. Some wounds, she thought, run too deep for simple gestures to heal. Then, unexpectedly, Maureen responded. Not with a letter, but with a phone call. Hayley remembers the moment vividly. The shock of hearing that distinctive, powerful voice on the other end of the line, now softened slightly by age but still unmistakably Maureen O'Hara. The conversation that followed lasted nearly 2 hours, and it was, Hayley says, one of the most important conversations of her life. Maureen opened up in ways she never had before, explaining her perspective on their time together, her fears during that period, and her regrets about how she had handled their relationship. Maureen told Hayley something profound during that call, something that Hayley has carried with her ever since. She said, "I wasn't prepared for you, Hayley. Not for your talent, not for how much you reminded me of myself at that age, and certainly not for how your presence made me confront my own aging. Hollywood teaches us to be warriors, to be tough and independent, but it doesn't teach us how to gracefully step aside when our time is ending. I'm sorry I let my fear come between us. You deserved better, especially from someone who should have known better." These words, spoken with characteristic O'Hara honesty, brought Hayley to tears. It was the apology she didn't know she needed, the validation of her own experiences, and most importantly, it was truth. From that phone call forward, a genuine friendship developed between the two actresses. It wasn't the mentorship that young Hayley had once hoped for. They were both too far along in their lives for that. But it was something perhaps more valuable, a meeting of equals, two women who had navigated the impossible terrain of Hollywood stardom and survived to tell the tale. They would speak regularly on the phone, sharing stories, offering each other support, and discussing the industry they both loved and sometimes resented. Maureen told Hayley stories about working with John Wayne and John Ford, about fighting off Harvey Weinstein decades before the Me Too movement made such revelations public, and about the price she paid for her independence and outspokenness. Hayley, in turn, shared her own struggles with transitioning from child star to adult actress, her failed marriages, her battles with public perception, and the difficulties of raising her own children while carrying the weight of being a former Disney icon. The two women found common ground in their experiences of being commodified by Hollywood, of having their images carefully crafted and controlled, and of the struggle to maintain authentic selfhood in an industry built on illusion. Their conversations were healing for both of them, offering understanding that few others could provide. They had both been through the Hollywood machine and emerged on the other side. Scarred but intact, Maureen O'Hara passed away in October 2015 at the age of 95, leaving behind an extraordinary legacy of films and a reputation as one of Hollywood's most formidable talents. When Hayley learned of her death, she was devastated, but also grateful. Grateful that they had reconciled, that those final years had been marked by genuine friendship rather than the distant coolness that had characterized so much of their relationship. At Maureen's memorial service, Hayley was asked to speak, and she delivered a tribute that stunned many in attendance because it was so revealing about their relationship. Hayley spoke honestly about their early difficulties, about Maureen's initial coldness on the set of The Parent Trap, and about her own confusion as a young girl trying to understand why this actress she admired seemed to dislike her. But she also spoke about Maureen's later candor, her willingness to be vulnerable and honest about her fears and mistakes, and the friendship that had developed in their later years. "Maureen O'Hara taught me something crucial," Hayley said at the service. "She taught me that even our heroes are human, that strength doesn't mean never being afraid or never making mistakes. Real strength is acknowledging those fears and mistakes and doing the hard work to make amends." Maureen did that hard work, and I'm grateful beyond words that she did. Now, at 79, Hayley Mills is reflecting on her entire career and life with the kind of clarity that only distance can provide. She sees her relationship with Maureen O'Hara as a microcosm of larger issues within Hollywood and within the human experience. Hollywood, she notes, has always been particularly cruel to women, pitting them against each other, making them compete for a limited number of roles, and then discarding them when they age beyond the narrow parameters of acceptable femininity. The tension between her and Maureen wasn't personal at its core, it was structural. It was the inevitable result of an industry that treats women as interchangeable commodities with expiration dates. Hayley also sees their story as a testament to the possibility of growth and reconciliation. "We could have left things as they were," she reflects. Two actresses who worked together once and had some unspecified tension that everyone gossiped about but no one understood. Instead, we chose to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to build something real. That took courage from both of us, but especially from Maureen, who had to admit to feelings and behaviors that didn't fit with her carefully maintained image of strength and independence. This willingness to be vulnerable, Hayley believes, is Maureen's most important legacy, even more than her films. The lessons Hayley learned from her relationship with Maureen O'Hara have informed how she approaches her own aging and career twilight. She's determined not to repeat Maureen's mistake of resenting younger actresses or feeling threatened by their success. Instead, she's become something she wishes Maureen had been for her: a genuine mentor to younger performers, offering support, advice, and encouragement without the complications of jealousy or fear. She stays in touch with several young actresses, offering counsel when asked, and celebrating their successes genuinely. It's her way, she says, of honoring Maureen's memory and breaking the cycle of competition and resentment that Hollywood fosters among women. Looking back at The Parent Trap now, Hayley sees it differently than she did at 13 or even at 30. She sees a film that captured a moment in time, not just for the characters or the story, but for the two actresses at its center. There she was, a child on the cusp of stardom, innocent and unaware of the challenges ahead. And there was Maureen, a seasoned professional facing the twilight of her leading lady years, trying to maintain dignity in an industry that had little use for aging women. The film's happy ending, with the parents reuniting and the family coming together, was the fairy tale. The real story was the two actresses, decades apart in age and experience, both navigating the treacherous waters of Hollywood in their own ways. What Hayley wants people to understand now is that Maureen O'Hara was never the villain of this story. Hollywood was the villain, with its rigid expectations, its obsession with youth, its treatment of women as products with limited shelf life. Maureen was simply a person, talented and strong, but also flawed and vulnerable, trying to survive in a system designed to be particularly brutal to women like her. Her initial coldness toward Hayley wasn't about Hayley at all. It was about Maureen's own pain and fear. Understanding this, Hayley says, was crucial to forgiving Maureen, but more importantly to seeing her fully as a human being rather than just as a Hollywood icon. The truth about Maureen O'Hara that Hayley Mills is revealing at 79 isn't scandalous or shocking in the way tabloid readers might hope. It's something more profound and more important. It's the truth that even legends struggle, that perfection is a myth, that the personas we see on screen are just that, personas, carefully constructed and maintained. It's the truth that relationships can evolve, that it's never too late for honesty and reconciliation, and that some of life's most valuable lessons come from unexpected sources. Maureen taught Hayley about grace under pressure, about the importance of honesty even when it's difficult, and about the possibility of growth at any age. As Hayley approaches her 80th birthday, she's increasingly committed to telling these kinds of truths. She's working on a memoir that will explore her entire life and career, with a significant section dedicated to Maureen and what their relationship taught her. She wants younger generations to understand the context in which she and Maureen worked, the pressures they faced, and the courage it took to maintain any sense of authentic self in Hollywood's golden age. She also wants people to remember Maureen not just for her incredible films, but for her willingness, late in life, to be vulnerable and real. That vulnerability, Hayley insists, was an act of courage equal to any of Maureen's on-screen heroics. The film industry has changed significantly since Maureen O'Hara's heyday, and even since Hayley Mills's Disney stardom. Movements like Me Too and Time's Up have exposed many of the toxic dynamics that Maureen and others endured in silence. There's greater awareness now of how Hollywood has systematically disadvantaged women, particularly as they age. But Hayley notes that while awareness has increased, fundamental change remains incomplete. Older actresses still struggle for roles. Women are still often pitted against each other, and the industry still values youth over experience in ways that are particularly harsh on women. The system that created the tension between her and Maureen still exists, even if it's slightly less blatant than before. What gives Hayley hope is the increasing willingness of actresses to speak honestly about these dynamics, to support each other publicly, and to call out the systems that disadvantage them. She sees in younger actresses a solidarity that was harder to achieve in her generation and nearly impossible in Maureen's. She wishes that she and Maureen had been able to be honest with each other from the beginning, that they could have named the system that was creating tension between them and refused to let it damage their relationship. But she also recognizes that they were products of their time, bound by different expectations about professionalism and privacy. The phone calls between Hayley and Maureen in those final years covered an enormous range of topics, but one theme kept recurring: regret. Not regret about career choices or the films they made, but regret about relationships not pursued, honesty not offered, and walls kept unnecessarily high. Maureen told Hayley that if she could do it all over again, she would have been more open, more willing to show vulnerability, more committed to building genuine friendships rather than maintaining a carefully constructed image. These reflections from one of Hollywood's toughest leading ladies made a profound impact on Hayley, who has tried to apply these lessons to her own life. In recent interviews, when asked about her legacy, Hayley Mills doesn't immediately mention Pollyanna or The Parent Trap or her Academy Award. Instead, she talks about relationships, about the importance of honesty, about the courage it takes to admit mistakes and seek reconciliation. She talks about Maureen O'Hara and what their friendship, late blooming as it was, meant to her. This, she believes, is her most important legacy, not the films she made as a young actress, but the wisdom she can share as an older woman about what truly matters. And at the heart of that wisdom is the truth about Maureen, a truth that's ultimately about humanity, vulnerability, and the possibility of connection even across decades and pain. As we look back at Hollywood's golden age and the incredible talents that defined it, we often forget the human beings behind the glamorous images. We forget that Maureen O'Hara wasn't just the Technicolor goddess swashbuckling across the screen. She was a woman dealing with fear, aging, and the painful awareness of her own diminishing value in an industry she had given everything to. We forget that Hayley Mills wasn't just the perpetually cheerful Disney star. She was a child thrust into extraordinary circumstances, trying to navigate complex adult dynamics while carrying the weight of a studio's expectations. Their story, the real story that Hayley is now telling, reminds us that our heroes are human, and that might be the most inspiring truth of all.